change, right? So,
Do you think they're going to do a dive into what happened?
I mean, I would. I don't know if they will, but I certainly would if I was in a position to do that. And
I wonder what they can actually find. I mean, I don't know if they wanted it to be a conspiracy that people talked about, or if that's simply the best way to pull it off.
Yeah, or it's just as we saw, I think in the hearing afterwards, maybe just a systemic collapse of confidence.
There's also a confidence in the fact that the news timeline today is so rapid. When things are relevant and people are paying attention to them, is you have a couple of days, even with an assassination attempt on a former president, where people were murdered, and it's in and out.
Yeah, that's right. I think the news cycle now is like a 2 to 3 day social media firestorm, and we just cycle from one to the next.
Yeah.
And we have the memory of goldfish, and things that would have been era defining just come and go with astonishing speed and shock. By the way, I should say I don't think there was I doubt there was a conspiracy. I think anything's possible. I think we have a confidence collapse, and I think we saw that on display when the director at the time testified.
Well, there's all the elements that it could have been a conspiracy.
It could have, but this is kind of the thing, which is this, like, it also could have been systemic confidence collapse, and then it's like, okay, would it be better off for the institute, if it looks like a conspiracy, right?
Yeah.
Like, which world, okay, two timelines. Which world would you rather live in? The one with the conspiracies or the one with just like incompetence everywhere?
Well, I think you have both simultaneously. I don't think it's binary.
Right.
I think there's incompetence everywhere, and conspiracies are legitimate. They're real.
Yeah.
And that one seems like conspiracy. The fact that his house was professionally scrubbed. There's no social media record of this kid online. There's no nothing.
He's the only kid of his generation who's that fired up about politics to have no online footprint.
Right.
Like, it just doesn't make any sense.
And he's a registered Republican. Like, the whole thing is like so weird.
And he was like a bad shooter, and then he became a great shooter. And
well, he definitely trained.
Yeah, right.
Like, you could train someone to become a good shooter.
But
this is all you have to do.
But that's
don't move and do that.
Right.
Get all your mechanics in place. Right. Understand technique and positioning, breathing. It's not like the most complicated thing from a prone position.
Right.
But the fact that he chose to use iron sights, I thought was weird too.
Yeah.
There's a lot of weirdness to it. Yeah. From 140 yards with a scope, that is an easy shot.
Yeah. Well, then he could just like wander up.
That's the different timeline. The different timeline is he has a scope, and that's it.
Okay. All right. Right. That would have.
And Trump's dead.
Yep.
And then, boy, do we live in a crazy world then.
Yeah. Completely bizarre.
I mean, what does the streets look like right now?
Yeah.
What kind of like protests and riots and. Yeah. You think January 6th was nuts?
Yes.
If they had killed Trump, that would be January 6th on steroids everywhere.
Yeah, that's right. And we would experience it. I mean, I don't know. When I was a kid, my high school history teacher got us a bootleg copy of the Zapruder film.
Really?
Right, which was like,
what a gangster high school history
He was
teacher.
actually pretty focused on he really loved the Kennedy assassination. So we spent a lot of time on that. And so you kind of watch it frame by frame, and you can kind of see what's happening with there's lots of questions. But like when things like that happen, today, it's going to be in high definition 4K ultra surround sound forever.
Yeah.
Right. Playing out in real time forever. And so like I very much don't want to live in the world where those things happen.
Well, we are very fortunate.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, after the election, I was like, wow, voting works.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, about that.
Voting works. That's nice. Like they don't have the system completely rigged.
Yeah.
And then, but they kind of tried to rig it, at least with the media. Where the real rigging in the 2020 elections, I mean, you can cast all your conspiracies upon it in terms of like mail-in ballots and all this jazz, but the real rigging was the collusion between social media companies and the government to suppress information that would have altered the effect of the election.
Yeah.
That's legitimate.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, that was like direct interference, and it was aided and abetted by a lot of former intelligence officials, and by the current administration. Tons of pressure on censorship coming from this the current administration and all their kind of arms of the censorship apparatus.
You have your hands in the tech community. You have your fingers in all that jazz. Like, what was the general attitude about all that stuff when it was revealed? How did people, how did your peers respond to that?
I think anybody in social media, the internet companies knew it. So it was pretty widely understood. I mean, look, there's nothing that happened at Twitter in the Twitter files that wasn't happening all the other companies, right?
Right.
So it's a consistent pattern. If you got the YouTube files, they would look exactly the same. And of course, we should get the YouTube files,
sure.
Right? And now we probably will now with this new administration is probably going to carve all this stuff open. But yeah, no, look, it was a pattern. And then look, the companies bear a lot of responsibility, and the people in the companies, made a lot of, I think, bad judgment calls. But the government, the Biden White House was directly exerting censorship pressure on American companies to censor American citizens, which I think, by the way, is just flatly illegal. Like, I think it's actually subject to criminal charges. Like, I think there are people with criminal liability who were involved in this. So there was that. There were also members of Congress doing the same thing, which is also illegal. And then there was a lot of funding of outside third-party groups that were bringing a lot of pressure down on censorship.
Yeah.
And just an example of that is there's a unit at Stanford right next door, to us that, was the Internet Censorship Unit that was funded by the U.S. government and exerted tremendous pressure on the companies to censor. And it was very effective at doing so.
Does it smell like sulfur when you walk those halls?
It is very dark and grim. This whole thing is very bad. And so
Stanford.
Oh yeah, Stanford. By the way, another unit like that at Harvard. A bunch of universities got pulled into this. A lot of NGOs and nonprofits got pulled into this. And so the Twitter files showed us kind of the basic roadmap. And then there's this thing called the Weaponization Committee that Congressman Jordan is running that has also revealed a lot of this. But I would imagine the new Trump administration is going to come in and carve all that wide open. And I know that there are people being appointed to senior positions.
When they revealed how much money the Democrats had spent on the election and how much money was spent on activist groups.
Yeah, right.
It's like more than $100 million, right?
Yeah, there's extensive government funding of politically oriented NGOs.
Yeah,
NGO is one of those great terms, like non-governmental organization. All right, like what the hell is that?
Right. What is that? Tell me. I don't know.
Well, it's sort of a charity, but what it really
it's
sort of, but most of the time it's a political entity. It's an entity with a political agenda. But then it's funded by the government in a very large percentage of cases, including the NGOs in the censorship complex, like the government grants, National Science Foundation grants, like direct State Department grants, right, direct money. And then, now you've got an NGO funded by the government. Well, that's not an NGO.
Right.
That's a GO.
Right.
Right. And then you've got a conspiracy, like with censorship, then you have a conspiracy because you've got government officials using government money to fund what look like private organizations that aren't. And then what happens is the government outsources to these NGOs the things that it's not legally allowed to do.
Like what?
Like censorship.
Okay.
Like violation of First Amendment rights. Right. The government. So what they always say is the First Amendment only applies to the government. The First Amendment says the government cannot censor American citizens. And so what they do is, if you want to censor American citizens, you're in the government. If you're smart, you don't do that. What you do is you fund an outside organization and then you have them do it.
Boy.
Right. And that's what's been happening. Right. And
that's like hiring a hitman. Like, it's not okay to murder someone, but you can hire someone to murder someone and then you're clean.
Yeah. And if you want to solve a murder, it's not enough to find out who the hitman was. You have to find out who paid the hitman. Right.
Right.
You want to work your way up the chain. And so a lot of this traces into the White House. The best defense the companies have is that a lot of this happened under coercion, right? Because when the government puts pressure on you, like it might be a phone call, it might be a letter, it might be the threat of an investigation, it might be a subpoena, it could take many forms. But when the government does that, it carries, that's a very powerful message. It's like a message from a mob boss, right? It's like, don't you want to do me a favor? It's like, yes, Mr. Gambino, I do, right? Like, I like my corner store. I'd like it to not catch on fire tonight, right? And so there's this overwhelming hammer blow of pressure that comes in. And by the way, even when the government doesn't talk to you directly, if they're funding the organization that is talking to you, then it's very clear what's happening. And so you come under incredible pressure. And so the whole kind of chain, this whole chain of governments, activists, universities, and companies was corrupted. And then on top of that, people in the companies in a lot of cases made a lot of decisions that I think they're probably increasingly starting to regret.
What was confusing to me was that the government spent so much money on these activist groups during the election, and I didn't understand what purpose that would serve. Like, what function would it serve to spend all this money on these activist groups that already support you, supposedly?
Yeah.
Like, are you bribing them to support you? Are you paying them to go on talk shows and consistently repeat the government's message, the current administration's message? Like, what would be the function of that?
So I think in some cases it's just pay to play, right? So as an example, we know that Kamala's campaign paid certain on-air personalities, and then there were which it's your point. People were very supportive of Kamala, who then gave her interviews that went really well. And so I think in some cases you just have straight pay to play. That's just how that system works. It's just expected. And then I think you have other organizations like these NGOs and others activist groups where they're actually they actually do field activities, right? And so there's maybe there's a get out the vote component, or there's social media influence downstream component, or some other kind of field activity that's happening in support of the election. I just
didn't think that they pay, when it's still unclear whether or not celebrities got paid to endorse her. Right? Have you?
They've mixed it up because there's like Oprah said, her production company was paid to put on the production, but she was not paid for the interview.
Yeah, whatever.
But it was $2 million.
$2.5 million. It was initially listed as $1 million, and it turned out it was 2.5.
Right, and so
but if I have a production company, and my production company gets paid $2.5 million to endorse Trump, and then I go, I didn't get any of that money. People are like, shut the fuck up. Of course you got. It's your company. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
And also, how much does it cost to do an event?
Yes.
How does it cost $2.5 million to put on an event? Like, are you feeding people gold sandwiches? Like, what are you doing? Like, how is that possible?
Yeah, exactly. So, and then because the fact that it's deliberately obfuscated, of course, is a clue as to
I just
what's
thought
happening.
The really bizarre one was the allegations, and I'd say unsubstantiated allegations. It's been alleged that Beyonce got $10 million and Lizzo got $3 million. Eminem got $1.8 million. Like, really?
Yeah. I think if you just like published all these numbers, these celebrities would all get so mad at each other that
sure they are.
Then you would learn everything. It's
Eminem
like,
got short.
Right. Lizzo's furious right now, right?
Yeah.
Lizzo's probably listening to this right now, being like, "What?"
Well, I wonder if Lizzo was like, "I didn't get shit." I would say it, but why haven't they said it? Like Beyonce has been mum about the whole thing. I think I would probably say, like, I didn't get any money to do that.
Yeah.
But that was a weird one too, because a lot of people thought Beyonce was going to do a concert,
right?
And she just went out there and talked, and everybody's like, "What the fuck?" Because they all came to see a free Beyonce concert, and then she just said, "I want to support Kamala Harris," and everybody's like, "Good." Now, if you like it, then you should have put a ring on it, right? Come on, we love your songs.
Yes,
that's what we're here for.
Yes.
I just didn't think that it was even possible that a